Well, hello everyone. Is it hot enough for everybody? I don't have any hot enough jokes, but we'll go with that. My name is Michael Carter, and for lack of a better term, I guess I'm the director of the Monroe County History Club. We've been here quite a while now. Welcome to my wife, Paulette. Yay. My brother Steve, and my cousins back there in the corner. Okay, how's that? You may have to disinfect this, you know. We've been at this a long time, and it just keeps getting better. Many thanks to the American Legion, which has been our home base for over 10 years now. Thanks to the wait staff, too. They work really hard. So be generous with them. I don't get a cut on it, but be generous to them. And thanks so much to Cats TV, who just helped me hook all this stuff up here. Thank God they know what they're doing. When they came on board in 2015, things just seemed to really take off. Dave is our cameraman today, and he's our usual guy. Thanks to Dave. It's a real professional bunch they have down there. Cats puts all our programs on their own channel, and in addition, I'm able to put every program that they film on YouTube for everybody to see. Many people can't attend these live programs because they have jobs or they live out of state, and this really allows them to be a part of our live audience. Believe me, a lot of people who are transplanted Bloomingtonians watch these programs from all over the country. I know because I hear from them. They let me know. We're preserving local history here, and I hope people are able to watch these programs on YouTube. And the way they can do it is just get on the YouTube search engine, type in Monroe County History Club, and they all pop up. We work closely with other history-minded local organizations. They support us. We support each other. Monroe County History Center, Public Library, IU Photo Archives, Cats TV, and others. We've done presentations on so many different subjects, and the good part is I think we have many more yet to do we haven't thought of. How many first-time attendees today? Have any first-timers? If there are, if you want to get on our email list, just send me your email address, or write it down for me, and I'll give it to George Carpenter, our guy that takes care of that kind of stuff. He can't be here today. And for right now, Daniel Schlegel, he may have stepped out a minute. Oh, there he is. He has a few remarks to make.
All right, hello everybody. I'm really excited about Christine's presentation, so I'll be really brief, but we have a great new exhibit that just opened up about newspapers in Monroe County. Our curator and assistant curator had a lot of help, a lot of volunteers that did an amazing job on this. So I strongly, strongly encourage you to come out. A lot of people said they just thought they'd stop by, and they spent way more time than they realized looking at this exhibit. So if you have a chance, make sure to stop by and see us. And then tomorrow, as many people know, we took on a lot of the HT collection, and we need a lot of help identifying anything you know of in the photos. So tomorrow is the first of several programs we're going to have, and it's from 9 a.m. until 11 at the History Center. We'll have coffee and donuts, and we're just asking for help to identify anything in these photos. So if you are available or you know anyone else, please make sure to come by the History Center tomorrow. We will continue to do these, so keep an eye out for new ones next month. I will announce it again, don't worry. But this one is coming up tomorrow. I have some flyers over at the table where I have a lot of books, so please feel free to stop by over there afterwards. And we also have flyers for the garage sale extravaganza that will be happening in November. Those garage sale ladies are already back at it again, organizing things. So if you did a late spring cleaning, please feel free to stop by out there on Wednesdays or to call us for information or grab one of these flyers so you have the dates for the November sale. So thank you, everybody. Good thing Michael keeps me on track here. So next month, I will be up here as a presenter with, neither of them are here, with Justin Robertson and Hillary Fleck from the History Center, and we're going to talk about the history of our property there. How it was a school, and then it was the colored school, and then it became the library, and now it's the History Center. So we're going to talk about the evolution and progress of what's happened at that property where we are now. So we're going to be talking about that next month. So please feel free to come back, tell your friends. We're going to have a really good time with that. But that's going to be next month, August 29th. Good thing Michael's here. I would not get the date right or anything. So I'll turn it back over to Michael. But next month, we're really excited about this presentation. So hopefully we'll see all of your friendly faces there.
All right, thanks. Well, here's a preview of coming attractions, and we're scheduled mostly through July of next year, so pretty far ahead. So yeah, as Daniel mentioned, August 29th, he and Hillary Fleck and Mr. Robertson will give a program on how museums work and the history of the History Center. September 26th, Dr. Clay Stuckey, a fellow BHS graduate, is going to give a brief history of the Bloomington High School campus. The campus of the old-time Bloomington High School, the real Bloomington High School, by the way. And he's going to, it'll be great. Everything Clay does is good. October 31st, Rod Spa, who's been working down at the History Center, will give a program on Bloomington's Feltus family. Printers, politicians, actors, and circus folk is his description. And he's going to talk about the newspaper collection they have down there also. November 28th, Duncan Campbell, who's given 2 or 3 presentations here, will give a program called The Indiana Barn in Transition. January 2nd, 2024, Rosie Gersman. I think, Janie, you might know Rosie Gersman, right, or not? She's going to give a history of Smithville. Okay. Smithville, Indians, pioneers, ski bows, and Lake Monroe. The presentation will introduce you to family names and individuals that helped that area of Monroe County flourish and to introduce education and sports. January 30th, 2024, Dr. John Butler, Jake Butler, who's given 3 or 4 programs here, will give a program called Depots, Platforms, and Flag Stops, a history of railroad places in Monroe County, and he's a real expert on that. February 27th, Jill Vance will give a program called To Build a Reservoir, the origin of Monroe Lake. March 26th, 2024, Nan Brewer will give a program called The History of the IU School of Fine Arts, the museum's collection. That's the Eskenazi Museum. April 30th is open at this time. May 28th open. June 25th open. July 30th, Cats TV, right here. I've been trying to get them to do this. Now they're going to give it next July. It'll be their 50th anniversary. So that should be interesting. That brings us to today. Christine Friesel, and I counted, this is your 7th program. So she's a frequent flyer. She knows what she's doing. So she's going to talk about what life was like in Monroe County in the 1880s, 1890s. And there was, in fact, a history club then, believe it or not. I wasn't there, but there was a history club in the 1880s, apparently. She's going to tell us all about that and other things. Christine?
Thank you, Mike. It's good to be back. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Christine Friesel. I'm with the Monroe County Public Library, and local history and genealogy is my turf. But other librarians there at the public library, the downtown location, can help you when I'm not there. But I've been there about 27 years, and what frustrates me to no end and delights me at the same time in a twisted way is when we find some interesting tidbit or information or date or fact or location, and I want to put it somewhere so we never have to find that again. And also, it would be nice if I didn't even have to be around for you to find it. I mean, that would be wonderful too. So with the Monroe County History Center, and now with the Monroe County GIS, the Surveyor's Office, we are trying to build a digital map. So when we find something and we find out where an event took place, or where an important character or entertaining event happened, including crime and scandal, we can pin it down on a map so we don't have to go back looking over our files. We're building Monroe County field notes, which is the early 19th century, because those are difficult to find, what happened on your parcel or your property. It's challenging for you to come downtown and to try to find out who lived in your house, or maybe you were always curious about that old place that you passed. For instance, the Monroe County, the Bloomington Speedway, right? You see that old stone fence, and you see that tall, or up on the hill you see the old white house, and you just start to wonder, would it be nice for you to just be able to look on a map and go, oh yeah, that's what that place was. So we're building Monroe County field notes for the earliest 19th century, but what I found is that it was very difficult. And so a lot of people said, can we just go into the 1880s and 1890s? It's easy, you know, that's more interesting, and that's really what we wanted. So we're playing with another type of a digital experience, and so I said, well, I have to go into the Gilded Age. So that's what this presentation is about, is what we found as we went through the Gilded Age. But I have to make a confession. It's called Monroe County Gilded, or MoCo Gilded, but I didn't really actually get much out of Bloomington. I fell into 6th Street and 7th Street, and then where the old Seminary Square is, and I just couldn't get out of the city limits. So if you'll have me, I'll come back again and tell you more about the county history. I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. Also, I'm going to be reading a lot because I want to make sure that I read text as it appeared in the newspapers in the 1880s, using language that they used. I don't want to insert my interpretation. I just really want to read the stories as they were told during that time. So I am going to be reading a lot. But apparently I'm not breathing a lot. Okay, we're good. Monroe County, or the Gilded Age, was, a lot of people think this is coined by Mark Twain. This is a cover of his book called The Gilded Age. Of course, something gilded is not really gold underneath, and so this time period, which some people stretch back into the 1870s, was a time of enormous industrial growth, building, financial success for some, but there was also a lot of nepotism and political corruption and financial ruin, and it was just a tremendous time for change nationally. This is where some people started to wonder if there was maybe a man behind the curtain pulling the strings, and the average guy could not get a leg up. Of course, there's no social security, no safety nets, so you really had to rely on your family or the church or the lodge or your veteran buddies to get through any sort of disaster. And of course, all families back then were highly functional, right? There was no addiction, no scandal. Everyone got along, kumbaya, all the time. So if you didn't get along with your family, or your family just got sick, got typhoid fever, and were wiped out, or they took financial risks and they were ruined, where would you go? You had to make friends. And so I found this as, coming from the way that I grew up, there was always some sort of safety net. Well, here there's a lots of desire for adventure, but no safety net. So we're going to try to remember that as we go back in time. So Monroe County Field Notes, just so you know, is a partnership with Monroe County History Center and the library, and we are trying to pin down, and you see the little red dots. When you go to this website, which is in development, you put your mouse on a red dot, it pops up a story, and we're still deciding how to convey that story and how to put the source citations within that story. But don't be surprised if this turns bigger when I come back next time. Thanks. It does help to go through some time period through the eyes of a person who lived through it. And I want to introduce you to Shag. This is Charles Duncan. He was born in 1868. His father was a Civil War vet coming from Illinois. And he he lived through this time period, and he made a ton of friends in Bloomington. And when you think about all that he saw and all that he talked about and all of his successes and failures and tragedies, it does help put that time period in a perspective. So his father dies in 1882, so he's 13 or 14 years old. And he is growing up on East 6th Street, across the street from where it used to be the Poplar's Garage. His house is the Runcible Spoon House. So just a show of hands, can everyone sort of agree to know where that landmark is? On East 6th Street, okay. So if you think of a map and you go north, that is the old Showers factory. So that's where he's growing up. And he works for Showers for years. And in 1926, they do a sketch on him because they just love him. He's so popular. But they say that he was a barefoot, gangling boy of 14 years of age, bashfully entered the Showers Brothers Company to become part of the manufacturing end of the business. Little did he dream that 40 years of his life, actually it's more like 70 by the time he dies, 40 years of his life would be spent with a single firm, and little did he feel that from a mere shed of a company would grow into the largest kind of in the country. And then when he was getting older in his years and he needed a assisted facility, what they did is that his friends arranged it that he could get spend his last days at the Masonic Lodge in, I can't think of where it is right now, in Indianapolis, in Franklin maybe. So his in the Indiana room, I found this typed written profile on Duncan, and I'm pretty sure it was written by Woodburn, Walter Frank Woodburn, who's 20 years younger than he is. But the Woodburns, as we will find out, loved history and had a real sense of responsibility for trapping stories. And I'm pretty sure this was written by Woodburn. And how do I know this? Because also with this typed profile about Duncan are these letters between Woodburn and Charlie going back and forth. And Charlie just really wanted to read the newspaper and keep in touch with what was going on in Bloomington. So this is written sometime in 1959 or 1960. Neighbors looking out their windows Saturday morning, December 5th, might have remarked, "Looks like Henry Andrews and Walter Woodburn are taking Charlie Duncan out riding this morning." They were indeed. Mr. Duncan was going to the Masonic Lodge in Franklin to spend the rest of his days. It represented the departure from a home that the Duncans have occupied without interruption for 63 years. The family moved to this modest one-story frame when they moved to Bloomington from Kentucky. The father of the family was a bricklayer and came to here to follow his trade in Bloomington when Bloomington was having its growing pains. His first job was helping build, his father's first job was helping build Central School on South College, where the convention center is. From this job, he went on to build the old First Methodist Church. That's also where the convention center is. And from there, his next work was the old Reformed Presbyterian Church. And then the writer, I think it is Woodburn, says these are all parking lots now. Charlie Duncan was a water boy to the workmen on these jobs, and soon after he went to work for Showers. During that time, he lived a typical life of that period. He was an active member of the Masonic Lodge for 53 years, the Redmen's Lodge for over 40 years, and the Elks Lodge when they were on South Walnut. Perhaps the most pleasant activities of many years for Duncan was his participation in the Mechanics Band, the Bloomington Mechanics Brass Band. This institution was very popular in the community. They gave free concerts at the courthouse lawn. So if you were growing up in the early 1920s, especially turn of the century, what you did is that you all went to the courthouse lawn and heard a band, or maybe at the 3rd Street Park. But also, when there was a funeral of some dignitary, the brass band dropped what they were doing, sort of like, I guess, National Guard. you work for an employer and you get called to duty, you would drop what you're doing because you had a funeral to go to, or you had an event to go to. But the brass band would drop what they're doing and escort somebody to their final resting place at Rose Hill, or Decoration Day, or the parades. They also did minstrel shows, and they rehearsed every week. And when in this letter, when they are listing the band members, there they list Frank Woodburn. So I think that's how Frank got to know, Walter Frank Woodburn got to know Duncan. But they played this as a labor of love. They did not get paid for this band performance. So if you can just think about Duncan as we go through this time period, I think you'll have an enjoyable ride. Duncan would later serve as township assessor and ran for township trustee. And he got married, but his wife died young, so he had one boy. His wife died when he was like 3 or 4. And so Duncan moved, and his brothers helped raise this young man. And as soon as he could, he got a car, and they traveled all over the world with one of the first cars in that area. But he's still living on East 6th Street, from a dirt road to a paved road. So he sees lots of change during this time. He loves baseball, and I think to do a presentation about Monroe County Gilded Age without talking about sports, which is a terrible weakness for me, I apologize. We should just do one thing on football and baseball in the early turn of the century. Just think about their safety equipment. It's very interesting. Anyway, he loved baseball. He loved concerts. But one of the things he loved very, very much was Shakespeare, which I thought this was interesting. I think that's why the name is Shag. I asked my husband, this will just tell you a lot, what do you think the shag means? And my husband's like, I think I've heard that word before. I'm like, no, in the 19th century, what do you think? So that's where we are. Our minds are in the 19th century and not a modern. So I think that might be because his love for Shakespeare, and everyone knew it at the Showers plant. Okay, so just to get your sense of what was Bloomington looked like, this is 1873. This is the central school. This is looking, did you say something? Are you disturbing the class, Mr. Lemon? So this is Central School, which is built, this is the building that Charlie Duncan's father helped build. And Charlie Duncan was a water boy in filling this. So this is, we're kind of looking at the convention center, that area. And if you go to the south or to the left of the frame, you would be heading to the old Seminary Square, the old IU. And then if you go to the north, or you see the steeple, that's the Methodist Episcopal Church. So this building is built in 1873, and we're just going to go date by date, these landmarks that would have been in Charlie's life, or others, obviously. In 1879, this is now a church, the Presbyterian Church is now the African American Methodist Church. And this church, again, we know a little bit more about this because of the Woodburns. In 1936, Woodburn is writing about this church. He says, he writes a family history, and he says it was in this school that he went to school. It was called the New Presbyterian School and the New Presbyterian Church, and the school was located in the basement. And then later, the Presbyterians gave it to the African Methodist Church congregation. And where is this church located? If you can think of the Graham Plaza on 6th Street, on West Street, just north, or just a little bit north of Little Zagreb. I guess we're going to be doing restaurants as our landmarks, right? That's the theme. This is, I think, an empty lot, or it's manicured or landscaped now, but that's where the African Methodist Church was. But still, we're on 6th Street, which would have been well known to Charlie. Just also take a mental note that region of the city was where a lot of the Presbyterians affiliated with the university were located, those old Presbyterians. so North College. And it's not too far from the square. I want to introduce you to Kate Height. She is related to the Margaret McCullough and the Heights and the Hemphills, the old Presbyterian family that came here in the 1830s to help establish Monroe County and Bloomington. These are the Covenanters that it helped with the Underground Railroad, according to oral history. And Kate Height is from that family. She's graduating from Indiana University in 1880, and we'll see more of Kate later. She eventually becomes a school teacher. So she is really attached to that school that has just been handed over to the African American Methodist Church. Also in 1880, the university is organizing summer tramps. These are field trips, and so I just want to let you know that while new immigrants are coming into Monroe County to help with the limestone industry, you know, there's a great demand for carvers. Italians are coming into Bedford. We are recruiting Italian carvers into the limestone industry, but at the same time we're getting new immigrants. We're also getting a great desire to say, oh, I spent my summer in Paris. Didn't you? We get this great way to express your wealth is that you would send your daughter, accompanied, of course, by a proper group. So there are some people that are in the newspaper that are listed as I am planning to go on this summer journey with our professors. So there are people who are putting their information in the newspaper saying, I'm going, and I'm cool, so why don't you come too? So it's very interesting, but this is, they're very interested in exploring nature at this point, the wilderness or the adventure of going overseas. And taking time off. This is a leisure class that can do this. Also, we have in 1881 a great tension and conversation. It's not really a conversation to some people. We have people who want to drink in Monroe County and Bloomington, and then we have people who want to make the saloons go away. We can't spend a lot of time on temperance, but a lot of these characters that I introduce, especially the Reformed Presbyterians, the people who are in leadership positions have a tremendous amount of pressure on them, not only to not drink, but also to form committees and to pressure the newspapers, to pressure politicians. You have the women who are trying to get the vote, of course, even way back then. But you also are having a great many people who are saying that we need to stop drinking. And so that was a huge part of the conversation, or the tension. And I don't know what it's like to join a all men's lodge, but I would think it would be a nice retreat from that sort of pressure if you were going to the Redmen's Lodge on Wednesday, the Elks Lodge on Thursday, and on Friday you go to the Mason Lodge, and I'm sure there's another one, Oddfellows. There's probably, I don't know if they were drinking. I think they had billiards, and I think they had a place to go. So in 1881, there was a woman who was really upset with the saloons. And so I'll just read to you what the Courier says. Mrs. Davis Wilson, the wife of a plasterer, enters the saloon of James Sluss and accuses the bartender of selling her husband liquor. Sluss denies this, but she throws a stone against the mirror hanging over the bar and escapes out the back door. Next, she enters Stockwell's saloon's back door. She seems to really know how to navigate. And once inside, she throws 2 stones crashing into a mirror before leaving out the front door. And the newspaper editor, these newspaper articles are not signed by anyone. There's just a general sense of reporting and committee work and opinions. The newspaper reminds its readers that the fines for selling booze to addicts is higher than the cost of the mirrors. So the editor is helping the community understand that these bartenders had no interest in selling liquor to this man because they did not want to be fined or shut down. They're just trying to make a living. The Bloomington Telephone, on the other hand, said this woman, who did not name her, had considerable sense and is much plunk, and that her husband was a lying dead drunk at Stockwell's Saloon, and she armed herself with a goodly number of rocks, marched in through the front of Sluss's saloon, stepped up and pulverized a $40 looking glass, then proceeded into Stockwell's establishment where she demolished another costly mirror, besides destroying some other property. The lady is as justifiable in knocking down a mirror as a barkeeper was in knocking down her husband with whiskey. The law may be justify the one, but the people will justify the other. So this is the same time period, the same incident. One newspaper protects her identity, does not interview the bartenders. The other newspaper interviews the bartender and tries to get the facts. And so you see this tension. The Bloomington Telephone is also pretty hard on some new immigrants in town, using some interesting language that we may have seen before and don't want to see again. But there is a great tension. There are actually 3 newspapers during this time, and each of those, when they land on your porch, your neighbor may comment, "Oh, I don't read that." I remember once in the Indiana room, I was looking for an obituary for a patron, and I said, perhaps it's in the Courier. If we can't find it in the Tribune, we should try the Courier. And the response I got was, "Oh, my mother would never allow an obituary." So I know there's strong opinions about which newspapers and which news sites you read, but back then there was a swing, and it was an obvious swing. So, and I'm sure Charlie Duncan was familiar with this. Another incident at that same time, so you can hear the tension in the back end if you're a drinker. Maybe there's no tension if you're not a drinker. You're just praying, I guess, or living a wholesome life. But everyone knew the Waldron family, but in 1881, there was a suicide. A young James Waldron did commit suicide. He just went to the local drugstore, picked up some morphine, and took too much. He's told the pharmacist that he had a toothache, and I don't know if they just believed him or if he really did have a toothache. But it caused a great scene of grief in the community. And if you can think of this on your map, in your head, this is the Catholic Church is at 4th and Madison. There's now bicycle apartments around that area. And the Kirkwood apartment complex is a little bit to the north. That's where the Waldron Tannery was, and the Waldrons own that corner. You can also maybe get your mind in place to think of that landmark of the Waldron Batman Antique Store, that Gothic-looking building at Kirkwood and Madison, the Garrett. Okay, that is the region where the Waldrons lived, and they owned a lot of property because that's where John Waldron's tannery was. Now, John Waldron held the first Catholic Mass in his house in 1864. So when people knew Waldron because of that affiliation, but also he was the president of the bank, so he was a wealthy man. Everyone knew him. He was buying and renovating the north side of the square called the Waldron Block during this time. But when you read about the suicide of his son, James, the newspapers were really shocked and really grieved, and everyone seemed to come together. It was one of the most beautiful articles I've ever read. They are just people just reeling with grief during this time. But I wanted, we had access to the archives of the church, and I just wanted to read you this. After 6 months this is an investigation at the Catholic Church. At the time, they were not allowed to give certain rights to people who had committed suicide. I think that was just so many years ago. But this is text found in their records. After 6 months agitation and investigation, the testimonies exhibited on all sides, parents, sisters, members of the household of John Waldron, Miss Susan Savage, to whom James Waldron had been engaged, the eyewitness to the time of the death, Reverend James Unvergsacht, obtained clear and convincing proof that James Waldron committed deliberate suicide and that the pastor, in granting Christian burial, committed a fault of ignorance about the case. The Lord may forgive him for having violated the rule of the church by excessive charity, and that he confessed his wrong before the whole congregation in his sermons in November. So between this time and November, 6 months of agitation, there was a great disturbance within the church because the Waldron family was so powerful, and they insisted that he get a Christian burial. And this caused a tremendous irritation within the church. You know, I don't know if you've ever been to a church that says you're not doing it right. You're not doing it right. Well, that was, at that point, a very difficult time for that neighborhood in that church. But certainly people were talking about it at the time. Also during that time, we have these characters, Margaret McCullough, who is a school teacher who really started to really shine during the Civil War. And I know that sounds kind of an interesting situation, but her brothers were out fighting in the Civil War, and she was a young 18, 19-year-old girl who was just teaching in a one-room schoolhouse. But she really did develop during that time, as a lot of people did. When you're under a lot of pressure, you have a lot of growth. But she was the aunt of Miss Height. And so Miss Height was the daughter of Milton Height, who ran a flour mill on North, if you go a little bit north of 7th, along the B line, 7th and Madison, 7th and Morton, that was where the flour mill was. But this family, the McCulloughs, also owned a general store on the west side of the square. And they were teaching. Miss Kate Height had just graduated high school, or excuse me, IU in 1880. And Miss McCullough, maybe she was even the superintendent at that time. If not, she does become the superintendent. But they're really pillars in the community. They really are making impressions on the children. But just imagine what it must be like to be these teachers, as the McCullough store really is upset by all the debtors who want to buy things on credit. And so during this time, the McCullough grocery store is telling people, no, to all those people who owe us debt, you need to be in here right now. So they're basically demanding payment through the newspaper. That would be their radio station, right? And so here's one of their stores that the McCullough store threatens its debtors. Ellis Sluss, and that's named Sluss, is also one of the saloon owners. I don't know how they're related yet, but Ellis Sluss Jr. has purchased a 6-pound Howitzer, and any man asking for credit at McCullough and Company will be shot on the spot. We don't know about the women, especially the younger ones. So they're trying to be lighthearted, but it really was a difficult time financially to not to just allow people to I'll pay you next time, I'll pay you next time. So while the teachers were teaching, these kind of ads were going on, and the Sluss was working for McCullough, and the Slusses were running the saloons, and the Heights and the McCulloughs and the Hemphills and the Woodburns were also teaching temperance and forming committees. And also, just on a side note, Mrs. McCullough was also the treasurer for the fundraising for the Alexander War Memorial on the courthouse lawn. So everyone knew her. Of course, she made no mistakes, right? Because everyone knew her, so she made no mistakes. And they knew where she lived. They lived across from the public library on East Kirkwood. If you think of the old Laughing Planet, the limestone building that was a fraternity for Herman B. Wells, if you go a little west of that, of course those are now stores, that's where the Heights lived and the McCulloughs lived. And of course, Shag Duncan would have known this family because it's just a few blocks from his house. So this is what Shag Duncan is thinking about and seeing right around the time where his father dies, and it's time for him at age 14 to go get a job to help his family. But also during that time, there's some disasters that happen. There's fires, some pretty major fires that shift Monroe County, but I'm sorry, the city of Bloomington. But before we talk about the flyers, let me mention that in 1882, Showers, when Charlie is starting to work for Showers, C.C. Showers at age 68 is killed in a terrible train accident. And it's really gruesome. And they are putting all of these details in the newspaper. I guess in those time periods, you wanted to read it. You wanted to know exactly what happened. Maybe it was a comfort to know where his body was when the train hit him, and how his body appeared at the end of that accident. But this is the Showers brothers. I mean, everyone is familiar with this family, or at least on the outside. But Charlie Duncan is aware of this going, and he sees this outpouring of grief, and it's all in the newspapers. And I'm very sure that he's reading all of this while he's trying to get a job there. But then right after that, in the next year, the Showers brothers plant at 8th and 9th, just a little bit north of Charlie Duncan's house, burns. And then there's also other fires that are going on. IU burns at the Seminary Square. So you have these two events where these are major fires and major disruption, but there's also major opportunity. So there's a big shift that happens in Charlie Duncan's life. Showers eventually moves to 8th Street. I'm sorry, where is that? 7th and Morton, thank you, where City Hall is now. And IU is making this shift to Dunn Meadow. So there's a big shift going on. And so with that shift over this time period, there's going to be also a different interest in real estate for these professors and for landowners. The square, of course, is humming and turning all the time. And they're also still, everyone's still vulnerable to fires. But I just wanted to let you know, these would be huge. It's such a common occurrence back then, the fires, just how people heat their homes and all that. But these were very exciting a childhood for Charlie Duncan. If we go back to the Waldron block at 4th and Madison, across from the Kirkwood Hotel where Framemakers is, this is where Waldron and Blair, one of the Waldron girls marries a Blair, and they build this house. So this is pretty ornate and beautiful. And it's a big contrast from, obviously, the poor. But everyone is watching this beautiful house go up, just to give you a sense. And then also we have Anna and Dr. Philip Holland. They are buying a house, or they are moving into a house that is on 7th Street. And so if you just take the Runcible Spoon House and you head down toward where Taco Bell is, I think that's the best way to describe it. That was where the Hollands lived at one point. And then across the street, they also operated the doctor's office. And then if you go catty corner to the Taco Bell, that's where the Seward Foundry was. And then there's also Dr. Weir's offices in that corner. So just to give you a sense of the Anna and Philip Holland's house. Now, Dr. Holland had a son who became a doctor, and in the Indiana Magazine of History, he recalls Bloomington at a later time, but he's describing just the house, the northwest corner of 7th and Walnut, a huge stone step, and there was a barn storage in which they kept the horse and the buggy. The carriage barn was a 2-story structure. Underneath the stairs leading up to the 2nd floor, there were 2 whole privies. The house had 4 fireplaces, a cast metal in the house. In the back of the house, there was a cistern which provided the drinking water for the family. And then there, if you go a little bit south of that, you're going to the courthouse square, from Taco Bell to the courthouse square. There's also the firehouse and another cistern. So Doc Holland is remembering the area, the neighborhood, and he's saying that at that time, it consisted of a series of 5 cisterns. Wells and springs were sometimes sources of water in the area, but this time was the beginning. It was beginning to be discovered. The limestone formation in the area just was not good for holding water, and so could not be depended upon to be healthy, and was a source of serious illness and bad health because the drainage entered from the barns, the privies, and the germ theory was only just now beginning to be accepted at this time period. So there was a lot of disease, and these doctors, I don't know if they were aware of it, but this is what was going on during that neighborhood. There are no paved streets. They were either crushed stone or dirt. They were all tree-lined on both sides of the street. And then he makes reference to that these are now on the southeast portion of town. That's what the streets look like at this time. But these were very narrow streets with deep gutters in the intersection, and they were made just for horse and buggy. So the lighting was done by gas in the homes, and by 1880s, we'll cover this again, by 1880 the city was allowing gas mains to be installed. But coal lights were being used. Most houses were heated by stoves, grates, and fireplaces, one sort of the other. And central heating of homes was not very popular at this time. So the Hollands did move a little bit, but I wanted you to show you this map. And you see the yellow is where 6th Street is, and I'm just going to point. Right here was the Runcible Spoon House. And then the Holland House is where the Taco Bell is, where that green star is. And then if you go 7th and Washington, around that area, there's, and if you go a little bit south, where, if you remember where the Ferris Market was on, I'm seeing some nods here. So, what's the night bar? I don't, Bluebird. That is where the Seward Blacksmith Complex was. It was huge. If you weren't working at Showers, then working for the Sewards would be a really a good gig, because they were really phenomenal importance. But that is the corner that we're talking about. And see, it's not that far from where Charlie grew up, so he would have known about this. Now, I've got this map, for the Monroe County Gilded project, I did create a map for you so you can look at it. I don't think it's too dark, and I think lunch is mostly over. So I'm going to ask Mike to pass out these maps so you can take home and study. I won't be talking about all the drops on here, but just think of yourself when you look at this map, how great it would be if it's a digital map, and we don't have to have this piece of paper, and we can actually just scroll through an address and find out what happened there. Thank you guys. So this is an 1892 map that IU allowed us to change. So at the top of the list, you'll see some stops in 1892 at the top right. This is a student orientation map of downtown. So you see that the university is only putting down 15 stops that a new student would want to know. Where the post office was, where the hotel was, a restaurant, where you could get some clothes, and where the certain churches were. And what we've done is, that's just the top right part, but what we've done is at the bottom part, we just added some more stops. And these would have been events and landmarks that Charlie Duncan and his friends at the lodges and the school children, they would have known about this area. I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes just to reorient, just to look at the map and to get a sense of where things are. But you can see that I'm pretty much not leaving downtown Bloomington. So for those of you who are interested in outside Monroe County or outside the city limits, I will come back again another time and we'll do more treatment of this time period in the Monroe County. You had a question?
Oh, well, not exactly. I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm Gertrude Feltus's great-granddaughter. Henry J. Feltus was my great-great. I have copies of the Star Courier and a lot of things that I talked to Hillary yesterday with Mike's blessing, and they're going to come out and scan my 13 gorgeous framed pictures I have in my gallery in the hall. I just can't turn them loose yet, but and anything else they want to copy, and I just wanted to extend that to you if there's anything you want to see. I do have 3 full years my dad typed up of Star Courier newspapers, 3 years of my 2 brothers and myself.
So to be descended from the newspaper men, I think that would be very satisfying.
It was amazing. I grew up watching Grandma write This, That, and You by Dorothy Kay.
Okay, you have so much history in your house. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing. And anytime we get it wrong,
It's okay. No, I wasn't wanting to make any type of correction. Everything you said I could remember. I did try to wiggle on. But I did want to extend the invitation if you want to copy anything or scan anything. Thank you.
We're giving this new life. Can everybody hear what it's on? Is that better? Is that better?
thank you, Mike. Okay. So if you are looking at the green star on my screen, if you go east to the next intersection of Washington and 7th Street, I just want to point out that that's where our namesake for the American Legion, Burton Woolery, was born in 1897. And the Wooleries were also in this area. So these are a large family, and these are beautiful big houses, and everybody knows so many of their friends. When houses are under reconstruction or renovation, or there's a fire, Mr. Holland said that when we had our house burned, we just went to live with the Wooleries for the summer. So there's a lot of coming and going out the back porch. Everyone knew your business, which for some people, if everyone knew your business, it would motivate you to leave town. And so there is an exit that we'll talk about later. Looking at your map, if you go to 7th Street, where the 7th and Walnut and 7th and College, where the radio station is, the old Masonic Lodge across from the jail, that is where the female seminary was. So that's another landmark that would have been in place during this time. So you can see a little bit behind here some of the houses. Of course, you can see all the fireplaces that would be required for that time period. Also, at 9th Street and 8th Street and Grant Street, this house is still there. It's painted yellow. This is in 1883. The former sheriff Alexander Williamson Martin Alexander, they called him Captain Mort. He decides to sell this house to Hannah McCaw. She is a black woman who, according to oral history, ran the Underground Railroad. So some people get confused and they think that this house was part of the Underground Railroad. It's possible that Alexander, who was during the Civil War, he was pretty busy, but it's possible that they put people in this house during that time. but Hannah McCaw did not own this house until 1883. In the 1850s, she had property out east, 3rd Street, where Brewster's Ice Cream is, just a little bit north of that. But by 1883, she is buying this house from Alexander. And so that proves they knew each other and that he had no problem her buying that house. But that area of town was, at that time, was now Showers' brother. I don't know if the Showers factory had burned at that point or if it was the next year. But there's a big shift in that neighborhood over this time period when the Showers brothers vacates that region and they head out west.
Where is this again?
This is at 9th Street, 8th and Grant. And if you look to, now the house looks like this, and there are, it's 323 North Grant. I'm pretty sure that's the address. But Hannah McCaw's grandson, who's only 4 at the time she buys the house, and he lives on the west side of town, but he eventually does reside in this house as he is writing letters to the editor, and he uses this address when he writes. He eventually becomes a great speaker. He is supported by the Wiley family, as they are all on the debate team at IU. He eventually goes to Harvard. He becomes a lawyer. He goes out to California and gets really into real estate law. He dies without children at a young age, but he would have been very popular because he was so highly educated and a very good speaker. And it was because of his speaking and his competition of the oratorial contest that we know he was so proud of his grandmother running the Underground Railroad that he's the one who was giving all these speeches. Unfortunately, he was giving these speeches in Indianapolis and in Terre Haute or other cities, and so we didn't realize this until recently. But anyway, he does spend time in his home in 1883. But in the next year, something Charlie Duncan would have been aware of is that IU's president during this time, he was a Baptist minister, and that, of course, is a big change for Indiana University. And he is a different style, he carries himself a different way, and there is some tension. It's mysterious, but there is some tension in the newspaper. He, for instance, plans a long vacation, and he wants to let the newspaper know, everything's just fine with me and the Board of Trustees. I'm just taking a vacation. There's nothing going on. We still, love each other. He didn't use that language, but he's like, everything's fine. I just happen to go on these vacations. They're always part of my vacations. But he is preaching at the different churches, but he is clearly a Baptist, and that's a definite shift in the denominations of leadership for Indiana University. And keep in mind, this is right after the fire, so this is a real big change, a lot of change in Monroe County with the shifting of the Showers and the shifting of the Indiana University campus. But he does do some hanky-panky. He eventually, he takes to he takes to a woman who is her first female to get a graduate degree in 1883. Her name is Kate Grayson. And he's married, of course, and they take to rendezvous. Now, I think about these young kids today, with the text messages, like how they communicate when they want to meet. And I think, how did they do this in the 1880s? You can't really say, well, I'll come to your class and I guess you say, I'll meet you every Thursday after your class. So Dr. Moss and Kate do get together. They have a pattern so that they can develop their friendship. And this is getting noticed on campus, and it's really not, it can't go on anymore because it's so scandalous. And keep in mind that Kate is the first woman to get a master's degree on campus, so she has a lot of celebrity and confidence, as she should. But there are people who are not pleased with this, and so there are some students And so, you know we have vigilantes in our heritage, right? So they find the janitor and they drill a hole through the ceiling. And they use that hole to observe the behavior in the classroom. And they are all posing for a photograph after they ruined their reputations. Well, they didn't ruin their reputations. It's their lack of character. So there's been lots written through Indiana University and other blogs about the killing of Dr. Moss. But what I want to point out is the photography in this point. I believe the photographer at this time period is J.B. Allison, who is north of the square, maybe west of Samara Restaurant, right? And again, wouldn't it be nice to know exactly where Allison's photography was? We can look on the Sanborn maps and note that there was a photographer. He called himself the artist, but a photographer. But he would need a second floor with light from the ceiling, and so those are noted. But we think that is where Allison is taking this photo in 1884. So Allison would know these when they show up, oh, we have to get a picture of the people who have caught this scandalous affair. Well, the scandalous affair was Kate sitting on Dr. Moss's lap and giggling and maybe some kissing. But we can talk about that later. But they just drilled the holes through the ceiling so that they could have multiple viewpoints of what was happening in the classroom. But then they are motivated or paid to go to Allison's photo studio north of the square to take this photo. This is Dr. Moss and this is Kate. They are also going to Allison's photography studio to get these photos taken. So the photographer during that time knows about this, and I'm sure Duncan probably knows about this. It's just a few blocks from his house. Who's coming and going and getting their photo taking? Kate eventually does just fine. She becomes a really popular English teacher at Butler University and has a really long, successful career. Moss, on the other hand, well, I can let his words. I'm not ready to go to sewage yet. I do want to talk about what happened to Moss because we have time, right? So he is attacked in the newspaper, and it's the Bloomington Progress that is sort of describing the trial that he has with the Baptist community. There's a trial of elders that listen to what he has to say. It's private, right? It's the Baptists really that he really concerned about him and his soul. And so they describe the trial. But then Moss, who is now, I think, in Chicago, he also had some financial scandals. He convinced a woman in another county to sign over her mortgage so that he could do some risky investments with his son in Chicago. I didn't track it that much. But so people are putting it all into one bad summer or bad winter for Dr. Moss because he's leaving town, he's taking money of people, and he's taking people's character, and he's ruining the reputation of Indiana University. But the editors for the Bloomington Progress get a letter from Moss, and he says, there's no truth to all of this stuff that you're hearing about me. He says, this article that the Progress has printed, it pretends to describe a scene in the Baptist church on Sunday last, a scene that never existed except in the brain of the inventor. I am described as a completely broken down, with tears streaming from my eyes, and with trembling voice, saying that before God and the church of man I have fallen, and asking for charity of the Christians. There were neither tears in my eyes, nor my voice when I spoke to the church, and there were no occasion for them, for I have never had any of the emotions indicated by the quoted expressions. This is really interesting that Dr. Moss is saying, I never had these emotions. So that was really that was instructive for me, I thought. It was an issue of whether or not he was emotional or not. Whatever wrong I may have done to others or to myself, in connection with the recent events, it does not itself involve any unworthy impulses or motives. Nothing of the kind was discovered by the church council recently held here. And of course, I was not asked to acknowledge what does not exist. So he goes on to say, for the charity of Christians, very likely this needed by all of us, especially by those who fabricated such cruel falsehoods. So he's doing his PR work at this point, and the newspaper responds that in a few minutes, this is what really happened at the Baptist meeting. In a few minutes, Dr. Moss took the floor and was completely broken down, tears streaming from his eyes like a child. He spoke slowly and trembling, saying that before God, the church, and man, he had fallen, but asked the entire the charity of the Christian church to be extended to him. So on and so on. And so humiliated, another elder said he had never seen anything like it. He's so humiliated did he appear that by the time he was through, nearly all the audience was in tears. It just goes on to describe how a newspaper can, there are sides to everything. It just sort of boiled over. He moved away, Kate moved away. And what did Indiana University learn? They no longer hired preachers. I want to stop in 1886 to show you the Seward Corner here. This is at 7th. This is across Caddy Corner, or across the intersection for Taco Bell. And let's see. I want to get to 1886 because this is when the newspaper reports that the city is ready to install electric lighting. They decide that the Jenny Electric Light and Power Company can be given a 3-year contract to provide lights. 9 lights will be placed, and these are the positions that will do the most good and be operated until 12 o'clock each night, except when there's moonlight. These lights will be placed at the corner, the courthouse tower, 3 on the schoolhouse, 1 intersecting the streets of Dr. Weir and Dr. Seward's corner of Washington and 7th Street, 1 at the corner of Kirkwood Avenue and Lincoln Street by Miss Cherry's, and on top of the UP Church, the Presbyterian Church. So that is across, at that time, that Presbyterian Church is across the street from the courthouse, where the Knights of Pythias building is now, or where, I need another landmark there, across to the east side of the courthouse square. Malibu Grill is there, thank you. So this is, they only have a budget for 9 lights, and of course they would want to put it at an intersection where the doctor lived. And so Dr. Weir is in that neighborhood, and Dr. Weir, by the way, is providing a lot of medical care to the black community that's growing in the area of 9th and 8th Street, North Grant, and into the 10th area. But also during this time, I have this great photo of the mechanics band that Charlie Duncan would have been part of. Now, look, if you look at this, so we are 20 years away from the Civil War, so the uniforms. There's a strong desire to have some sort of polish during this time. Remember, we have a lot of horse poop in the streets, and we have, there's just, because we can afford it, we have innovative sewing machines now. We have technology that can transport really good fabrics and tassels. And so there's a great industry on the square, Courthouse Square, for hat making. If a woman wanted to make a living on her own, she could teach, but she couldn't get married if she was going to be a teacher. At some point, they relaxed that rule. But if you were a hat maker or a dressmaker, that was socially acceptable for you to be in industry. And so the Courthouse Square had a lot of women selling hats. Anyway, my point is that it was really exciting way the dress started to come back, and men also wanted to dress this way. And so they did pass the hat to try to get the community band some uniforms and some instruments. But let me just tell you that this is called the mechanics band. And I always wondered, what does that mean? I know that people say that if you are a musician, you're probably good at mechanical engineering. I've heard that before. But you have a good sense of rhythm and you like the music of the engine or something. I don't know. But if you look at my red circles, there are 5 Sewards, the blacksmiths, the mechanics working at the Seward foundry. So that Seward foundry was full of these musicians. Now, Showers Brothers also had musicians, but they also did theater. The Showers Brothers were, their factory workers were also doing a lot of skits in theater. But I just wanted to show you the mechanics band that were the Sewards, that were just a few blocks from Charlie's house, the Runcible Spoon house. He would have been aware of this excitement, and eventually he does join the band. So I just thought that was interesting, how close the Seward foundry is to his house. Now we're moving on a little bit. I wanted to mention this mostly because of the talk we had recently about stone fences, and I just wanted to mention this as you are going by the Fairfax Road, and you see this White House above Speedway, and that stone fence by the Speedway. That's the Blakely farm. I think they're a hog farmer. But I just wanted to mention this. I know that I'm not getting outside Monroe County much for this presentation, but in 1887, William Blakely is advertising his farm for sale. He says it's about 300 acres, so that's the size of that real estate. And he says there is a plenty of timber. The land is well watered. Of course, we have the creek that goes through there. And there is over 1.5 miles of stone fence. And a recent stroke of paralysis renders me unable to attend it. So I just wanted to mention that there's great excitement as the Blakely family is moving. I think he eventually moves to Kansas to live with family. But we'll come back to the Blakelys. They show up in the Gilded Age some more. So we're in 1887. That's a shift in the county. But then also at Indiana University, there's a desire for a creation of a history club. This would be the IU students creating a history club. So I don't know if they're talking about Monroe County history or they're talking about ancient history. But I wanted to point out who is one of the people that are starting that as the history professor is Woodburn. So again, we have Charlie Duncan is being taken care of by Walter Frank Woodburn, and I believe this is his grandfather, James Woodburn. And we'll talk more about him later. But around this time, it's 20 years after the Civil War, or 23 years after the Civil War, and there's a desire to start collecting history. So I know that you feel the same. I'm preaching to the choir. But sometimes it's seasonal, right? Sometimes you feel like tearing down all the old buildings, like you're going to throw away everything and give it to Goodwill because you're in your minimalist stage, right? We're going to be very modern. And there are some periods or seasons in communities where they want to save everything. And so it's interesting to me that this is the time period where the History Club is starting up. And well, I won't preach. I just think it's interesting time. There's just so much change going on. You have just 20 years away from the automobile, right? But you have people who are just still powering their houses with fire, and now they're getting ready to power it with gas or electricity. And then you have a great shift in women's movement. There's just a tremendous amount of change. And people are leaving the farm and getting lost in their morals or values or just physically. In 1890, people are starting to explore. This is a photo by Indiana University, the cavers. The middle guy with the beard is Gustav Karst. He's from Prussia, and he has an influential leadership at Indiana University because of his obviously his knowledge. But he coordinates these excursions, and these cavers are going all over the county. And you just look at them, how rugged they are. These are the folks who are sort of resisting how should I say it, the programming and the social standards and the tension that's going on during this time. There's a great a programming that you have to do this to get ahead. And there are some people who say, I'm just going to go for a walk in nature. So the naturalists are really booming during this time as a resistance to some of the programming and the temperance movement, perhaps. These are people who maybe want to say they want to be unschooled. They're tired of learning how to do cursive writing. They want to leave the farm. They want to go to the big city and explore. So it's a great adventure going on during this time. So I want to put a circle around Theodore Dreiser. He is an author, a novelist, who was at Indiana University just for a short sprint. I was doing some research on him, and I ran across an article by Rose McElveen. Does anyone remember Rose McElveen? Oh, I have very fond memories of her coming into the Indiana room to tell me the what's what, and she didn't hold back. God bless her. But she wrote an article about Theodore Dreiser. He's coming to Indiana University only because one of the school teachers thought he had some talent and felt sorry for his family. He was like number 9 of 10, and they were so poor. And she thought, oh, I'll underwrite his schooling at Indiana University. So he comes to IU, and Rose McElveen writes, to say that when he stepped off the Monon train in Bloomington in the fall of 1889, that he was an ugly duckling is an understatement. He has cast in one eye, a receding chin, buck teeth, a suitcase of hand-me-downs, and an inferiority complex. He left in the spring of 1890, and I just want to point out that he is known for what's called the father of American naturalism. His novels covered how basic instincts drive us: passion, the demand for comfort, the fatigue, and it's not virtue that drives us. It's just basic survival. And during this time period, I think his attitude was, get real. You really do need a drink to get through the typhoid fever and the infants that you are burying, and the mud, the oil, the steam, the gunk. You can't afford an attorney if you get arrested. What would you do if you lost your wallet? I mean, it's just, obviously this is a poor boy who's coming to Indiana University. He does not make it. He does not want to be here. He eventually goes, I think, to Chicago, and he does become a published author, but he writes about themes of not having a safety net. Again, what do you do if your family is not functioning very well, or if you don't like your family at all? What do you write? Sister Carrie, and other novels, I could find that out. American Tragedy. But he was during that time, but I just want to say that he decided he wanted to be with the cavers and not the fraternity boys. So that was interesting to me. Although some of these might be fraternity boys. So we have a woman who's opening her dental practice at this time, and she's on your map. If you see this house is on East 7th, she eventually lives in this house. But when she comes in 1890, she goes to stay with the Lindley, the druggist. Is Lindley a druggist? So she works out of his house for a while. I assume she's learning the magic potion to put people to sleep before she works on their teeth. But then she also has her practice open in 1892. The map that I gave you, IU is promoting her location on South College, Dillon's Dental Room. So we should know about her. And she's related to Judge Dillon, I think his sister. Just staying on 7th Street a little bit, I want to go back to show you that at some point the Hollands leave 7th Street. I think they're selling the real estate there for perhaps other things, but they eventually moved to North College. This is a house at one point that had a fire. So I don't know if you're looking at a house before or after the fire. But the Hollands, they are living across the street, I think, from the old Woodburn house, which is still there. You see if you can visually see today on North College, the old Farmers Museum, the white by the Farmer House, and then the Woodburn house is there, and across the street are the Hollands. So this is where, at some point, the really pretty houses are, and IU has a lot of professors living around this neighborhood. Colonel Loudon, an attorney and professor, he is also in this neighborhood. Here's a photo of the Woodburn house, and James Woodburn. We owe a lot to the Woodburns for preserving these histories and these stories. Here's another shot of the Woodburns. This is taken in their backyard in 1910, so it's much later, but you can see the factory behind there. But you can see this neighborhood has such prominence and a footprint. And just keep in mind that Charlie Duncan is best friends with Walter Woodburn. He's really good friends with him, and they're writing back and forth to him as Charlie is reminiscing about old Bloomington. Walter is collecting the stories. So there's this great interest here between North College and East 6th Street, and all of that's going on there. The stores, everyone knows everyone, so you can't really mess up, right? Which is why you leave town. Anyway, this is a 1908 high school photo, and as Walter Frank Woodburn, he's a musician, and this is just a younger photo of him, obviously showing to you that he's interested in music. But he's pretty young in 1908, so he is much different in age than Charlie Duncan. So keeping along just chronology, we have a photo of the poorhouse. This is the way that this photo is labeled by IU Archives is 1891, the debtor's prison. And I'm assuming that this is the same as the poorhouse. And where this is located, it would be good to know during that point. I don't know, but I just thought I'd put it out there that there really, again, the idea of a safety net is not there. So people made decisions based on where there was security. And so if you can think of the pressure to join the temperance movement with your neighbor, it was tremendous. You might need your neighbor, you might need your cousin, you might need your aunt for financial backup in case something happened. So that people made these decisions based on whether or not they had that safety net. Just to remind you that we're going to step back a little bit and go show you a photo of Shag's home. This is the Runcible Spoon House, just in case nobody knows about that. I encourage you to go in, and I am sharing this with the owners of the restaurant so that their workers can get to know Shag, to know that he was a township trustee, so that they can know that he loved Shakespeare. And again, just a reference to the map where he lived. So things really change in 1894. I'm 15 minutes over. Are you okay on time? Okay. All right. Thank you. So things really change in 1894, so I'm going to go a little fast. And that's because John Nichols, the architect, comes back to town. The Nichols have been here for a very long time. His father was a contractor here doing work. But John Nichols went away, got some training, and came back. And this is his house on North Walnut, close to the rail line. But he's building this as a studio. And then he starts advertising his skills and his services, and he becomes a predominant leader in architecture for Monroe County. 1895 is really a dramatic shift nationally and locally, because that is when a lot of houses are able to be built with electricity, if you can afford it. So there's a change. This really just triggers so much in how people communicate and how they socialize and how they are industrious and how they can get things done. So just real quickly, The Waldron Batman house is built in 1895. Architectural historian Bill Coulter tells me that there's no way that John Nichols built this house. So if there is a folklore that he did build this house, but it's completely different than all of the other houses, and he wasn't even in town during that time, or he was just returning, so he wouldn't have built it. I like to think that maybe there was some characters that were pressuring specifically, I want the house to look just like this. That's interesting, but we don't have any evidence of that. So in 1895, that's when the Adams twins' houses are built. You guys may remember this as the old school administration building. Is that right? So this is at the corner of 2nd Street and College. There's 2 identical houses built specifically for the Adams family. And in the back is the carriage house. And this, I believe, is one of the first houses built with electricity. So the Adams family were very influential. You can see, I don't think I circled where Miss Beck is in here. Mrs. Beck was an Adams girl, and she was in charge of the state temperance chapter. So she is a serious temperance woman, and so this family, I guess you could not escape it. If somebody is in charge of shutting down the saloons, you would know what her mission was, and you would know. So we have her brothers are limestone executives and bankers, and so I don't know how they dealt with their stress. I'm sure they did macrame or something like that. But their sister was very busy enjoying the fruits of their investments and telling people not to drink. But this is a photo of the 19th Century Club. These are 12 women, and you could only, if one woman moved away or, God forbid, died, the only way you can be in the 19th Century Club was to be invited. And the 19th Century Club was wealthy women who wanted to have a book club. And the book club was, the curriculum or the reading list was provided by a curriculum out of Connecticut or some East Coast newspaper. You pay for a subscription and they would send you books. They kept on getting books about the biography of George Washington and Ben Franklin, and they got tired of that. And so eventually they decided they wanted to do good works for the community. And so they are the ones who helped doing fundraising to build the hospital and to build the public library. So these women have an incredible experience, commitment to improving Monroe County in many ways, and in Bloomington. And they were a very private company or private organization because they were wealthy and affluent, and they just didn't want to be asked for money, but they did want to be able to be very targeted in how they gave money. The Grand Hotel is built that time. This is, of course, where Argentum Jewelry is now, that corner. That's being built, so there's a lot of building going on, and new plumbing and new lights and water closets, telegraph service. This also had steam heated and a post office. Things are becoming more elegant and exciting for Charlie Duncan. Then we also have a theater house open. This is designed by John Nichols, and it's built in 1897. This photo was taken much later. It's in IU photo collection, but this is an excitement for Charlie Duncan. Then, of course, another beautiful house goes up on North College. This is the Buskirk Showers house, and there's just a tremendous beauty. John Nichols has done wonderful things to this city to really show wealth and grandeur. Worrell is building his house at this time. He actually, his house burns in 1893, but this is the new construction. This is where the Monroe County Public Library is now, on East Kirkwood and Lincoln, the corner of Lincoln and Kirkwood. So the Worrell house was built during this time, and Charlie Duncan sees this go up. It's just, it would be wonderful to be able to go into the house. Also in 1898, in April, we go to war. Loudon is on the left here. Colonel Loudon has a tremendous amount of leadership in the community, but also Hannah McCaw's grandson, Willis, he joins the Spanish-American War, and he earns the trust and love of his fellow military officers, and is promoted to the. I mean, he definitely promotes this as part of his shaping of his career. I just want to show you this photo from the Indiana Historical Society. This just shows this is the southwest corner of College and Kirkwood, or 5th Street. And so this burned down. I don't know when it burned down, but fires just could come and ruin you. Anyway, if you go a little bit south of this, you might notice on your map I put a reference to a Chinese laundry. There is at some point a Chinese laundry down on this street, but on your map the Chinese laundry is actually at the book corner, a different place. But I wanted to point out Bradford's telephone, that's where the newspaper office was. So it was just right there collecting all of the information for the local community right there on the square. In the Indiana Room, there's an oral history about a journalist, professor, and he says that during this time, his assignment was called, his beat assignment was called Meet the Trains. You, boy, go meet the trains. And what he did was he took a notebook and he went to the train depot and he asked people, why are you here? And people found the newspaper boy, they bought a newspaper, and they would want to get their business in the newspaper. I'm Harriet Smith. I'm here to see my elderly aunt, Lucinda Krantz. She has typhoid fever. We're really worried about her. And then he would write it down and put it in the paper. So I always have wondered, why do we know all this personal business in the newspaper? People could call the newspaper and say, oh, we need to explain why I wasn't at church last night. I'm very ill. This morning I'm very ill. But it was actually an assignment by the boy journalist to meet the trains. And so a train depot, of course, is not too far from this on the west side. In government, we have a government official who is removed from office because he is scandalously visiting houses of ill repute in Indianapolis, and it's well known. And he's never in office, and his money is disappearing. And so we have a lot of distrust for some officials at this time. And I just wanted to point out that his wife, he had mortgaged property that his wife had the title to, and he did not tell his wife that he had mortgaged this property. So he had basically a secret life. But his wife was Stella Blakely, the daughter of the Blakely house by the Bloomington Speedway. That's during that time when her father was moving, she was getting married to Mr. King. Her sister was getting married to the Dodds family. The Dodds families were also involved in politics, including the mayor. It was just really just scandalous. Everyone knew her business. Everyone knew her husband was visiting ladies of ill repute in Indianapolis, and that money was gone missing. She filed for divorce, but she continued to live on East Kirkwood, across from the public library and close to the Heights and Margaret McCullough. She did live here a long time, surrounding herself with school teachers as neighbors. So I'm sure she had a lot to say. In 1898, this is Kate Height again, our school teacher. Her brother is one of the victims of the Steinsville explosion, the dynamite explosion. 5 men are killed in Steinsville when they're building a road. It's just common, these horrible accidents. But everyone that would have read the newspaper and realized their school teacher had just lost her brother in this horrible accident. And of course, the newspapers are describing the gruesome detail that they can't identify the bodies because they can only, it's pretty gruesome, but this was common. Just a reminder where Kate Height was living. She actually, the Heights were the ones who gave the property to the Johnsons to build this house. Johnson eventually was in financial trouble, so he didn't actually live there. Maybe he was just a developer and didn't design this house for a residence. But this is another beautiful house that's going up on Kirkwood, and everyone's seeing just the tremendous difference in the town at this point. Everything's, log cabins are coming down, and these things are going up. Across the street, if you can think of the public library at the corner of Grant and 6th Street, this is the northeast side of the public library. That is where this house was. This is the Atwater House, which eventually became called the Atwater Hotel. This was a professor who started with the Woodburns, the history club. And I remember being told, I don't know if this is true, that when this house burned, a great many of Monroe County archives went with it because they were being held in this house as security. They had no repository for local history. But the Woodburns, of course, knew the Atwater, and Woodburn was, of course, a tremendous leader in local history. Closing out this century, we have another fire, the Presbyterian Church. And this changes everything for the downtown landscape. But it's interesting to me that the church was able to build this like a year and a half later. The women were already collecting money, and they were doing fundraisers. And the limestone executives that were part of the church were providing the limestone as well. I just want to point out that we still have horse and buggies. This is Louise Boysen, Wiley family member, who is sitting in front of her buggy at the Wiley house. And the reason I wanted this is in 1895, around this time, they're actually doing a count of how many horses are in Monroe County. Let me just see if I can find this. I'm sorry, at the courthouse on one day. They're just doing a count of horses. So this looks all exciting and wonderful, but we still have horses and a lot of poop. Sorry, you've already eaten your lunch, right? I can't get down here. Okay, this is Bedford pointing this out, that a Bedford newspaper has counted the number of horses hitched around the courthouse, 947 horses, 33 mules, and 6 oxen. This is in 1895. But I just wanted to end Louise, because she is, at this time period, she's going to school, she's doing independently, she's becoming the first woman editor for the IU Arbutus. And at this time, it's really, it's in 1905 when we get the Monroe County Historical Society. So I think that's where I'm ending. I went a little long-winded today. I hope I can come back and do some more history and give you a better map, maybe a digital one next time, okay? Thank you.